first of all, before we get into the moves and the transfers and all that kind of stuff like that, I want to find out how were you able to be in a position to be selected for Manchester United, considering obviously you're in, I believe you grew up in Cambridge, is that right? Or you're from Cambridge area?
Yeah, I grew up in Cambridge. I went to Melbourne Village College, which is sort of a little village between Cambridge and Royston.
Okay. So how did a trial come about for Manchester United? Where did that all begin? Where did you find out about the interest? And what was that experience like at such a young age?
It's when I was growing up, the big football that you played was schools football. So you'd play I played for Cambridge schools on a Saturday, and you'd play against other area teams. And then I, at the time, was on the books of Arsenal. So I'd play for Cambridge schools on a Saturday, then Arsenal on a Sunday. And I'd train once a week with Arsenal on an evening at Highbury in a little indoor area there during the week.
Yeah.
And then I was playing as a striker at the time when I was a kid, and I was scoring loads of goals at the Cambridge schools team and getting a bit of recognition. And then one day, someone told me that the Man United scout was coming to watch me, a guy called Ray Medwell, who was a massive part of my career and really helped me during them times. But he come and watched, was impressed with what he saw, and ended up going up in the school holidays where Man United used to take a lot of trialists. You'd stay in a hotel. There's probably about 7 or 8 of us from all over the country, people from Newcastle, Wales, because at the time, Man United they'd get anyone they wanted really, because at the time all the best young players went there. So I was probably about 14, just turned maybe 15 at the time, went up there, spent a few days training at the Cliff with other young players of a similar age, and then at the end of the trial was a game we played against Nottingham Forest at Littleton Road.
Right.
Played in the game, done well. And by the time I got home, I got the train home back to Manchester to Ely. It took bloody hours. Then from Ely to Cambridge, and Cambridge to Meldriff, and then finally got home. Yeah. And my mum picked me up from Meldriff train station, said she'd had a phone call from Sir Alex Ferguson, who was at the game at Littleton Road, and said that he wanted me to sign for Man United. So once I heard that, there was only going to be one team that I signed for. So I ended up signing schoolboy forms with Man United. And while I was in year 11 at school, I'd used to finish school early on a Friday and get the train up Friday afternoon, then be on the bench for the B team or the A team on the Saturday morning, and then stay over again and play for my age group team on the Sunday, and then come home. And that was how it was for while I was still at school, before I signed a scholarship and moved up there permanently.
Can you remember that moment quite well then, when your mum told you that you've had that phone call? What I can imagine the feeling. That must have been absolutely incredible.
It was. I thought she was messing about to start with. I thought she was having a laugh with me, but it was. It was incredible to hear that. It was like an incredible. And then after that, Arsenal wanted me to carry on there, so they came to my house, and Bruce Rioch was the manager at the time, and he came to my house in Meldriff, little village in Meldriff, and sat in with a youth development officer, and I had to say no to him, and that was probably the scariest moment of my life, doing that.
Yeah, I remember Bruce Rioch being Norwich manager, because I'm a Norwich fan myself. I remember his reputation. I've heard interviews that Ian Wright has done where he's talked about his time with Bruce Rioch, so I can imagine that would have been. What age were you then when that contract?
Yeah, to be honest, he was absolutely brilliant about it. I was only 15 years old, so
right. Okay.
There wasn't that much animosity, really. I think he was just a bit annoyed that he drove all the way down to Cambridge and told I weren't going to sign.
So, wow, having the choice between Manchester United or Arsenal, that's... you like, talent-wise, you must have been absolutely incredible to have those two. Could have pulled it.
When I was at my best, 15, 16, it all went downhill from there. I was on fire back then.
So when you were on trial, were you still playing up top, or did they move you over to the right wing in that trial, or did that gradually happen as you went
No,
through the age
that
group?
gradually happened. I played striker probably until I was about after the second year that I'd moved up there full time. I sort of got moved more on the wing. I think I was really fast when I was younger, and I got loads of chances, but probably missed too many of them to carry on playing as a striker. So they shifted me out wide. But I absolutely loved it when I moved out on the wings. I've not really played there before, but I just loved running with the ball. And you got more chance to do that when you was sort of playing out wide.
Yeah. Was it just a bit more freedom to just be able to kind of express yourself and just kind of go at players when you're out on the wing, rather than being solely relied on up front? And sometimes you can be starved of the ball, I guess, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was to my strength as well, because I wasn't brilliant at holding the ball up. I was sort of skinny, really skinny, not the strongest. Probably didn't do as much in the gym as I should have done.
Yeah.
And it just suited me better, and it made me a good striker to get signed for Man United. I don't think I would have ever have broke through or played any games there.
Yeah.
As a centre forward.
Yeah, and then I suppose you would go through the age groups, I'm guessing, get up to finally sort of like reserve football, etc., and then you'll break into the first team. Do you kind of remember having any conversations with Sir Alex going through those age groups? Did he ever come and talk to you guys and really kind of push you on, or was it more other coaches as you were going through the age groups?
The thing with Sir Alex Ferguson, he'd taken interest in everything, whether it was he'd know who everyone was, whether he was an under 15, under 16, or under. I spoke about him phoning my mum up, that he wouldn't just do that for me. He would have done that for all the players. He wants to take that interest, and I think that's why he's so successful in, like, the best manager that's probably ever lived, because he'd take that interest and know everyone from the under 10s up to the tea lady. He'd treat everyone with the same respect, and that was probably the genius of the man, is the way that he built relationships with people. But we used to play at the Cliff on a Saturday morning, so he'd always be in his office that looked down onto the pitch and watch the games, and that before he went off to Old Trafford for a home game. So he'd know who the players were that were coming through. I think I made my debut as a 17-year-old as a youth team player in the Worthington Cup, where he'd always tend to play a lot of the younger players to see how they coped. And it was, I remember the game, we played away at Aston Villa because Dion Dublin was playing. He was obviously a massive hero of mine growing up. He was playing. So I remember it well for that reason only, really. But we got beat 3-1, done okay. We was a really young team playing against a real strong Premier League team. So it was a tough night. But then after that, I weren't really around the first team and went on loan to Royal Antwerp in Belgium and spent 9 months out there. And it was when I came back from there that I really got my opportunity to be around and in the first team squad.
Yeah, so 2 parts from what you just mentioned there. First of all, the feeling that you have when you were playing, when you were in the changing room before the game, and then that moment of walking out onto Villa Park for your first team debut. What was that feeling like? That I can't imagine how you can describe it, really. Yeah,
it's just probably pure excitement, really. Obviously a bit of trepidation because you're looking around the dressing room and you're playing with the same lads that you play with on the Cliff on a Saturday morning against another youth team, really. There's only a couple of experienced players in there, but it's just that thought of actually doing it. I mean, when I was a kid running around my garden, I would have taken playing one game for Cambridge United at the Abbey. That would have been a dream come true. But to be going out to represent Man United in a first team game, obviously it's an incredible feeling. You probably don't appreciate it as much as a 17-year-old boy because it's just something that's happening, but still the excitement, I still remember it being so huge to be stepping on a pitch playing for probably the biggest club in the world at the time.
Some would probably argue still are today, to be honest, as well, . And then you talk about that loan move. Do you kind of say that is a point where you, I wouldn't say had to grow up in so much extent, but loan moves are so crucial for young players. And everyone always says you need to get out and experience first team football for real, just to have that proper competitive edge in you. Do you think that was like the turning point to then get you into the first team rather than just having these occasional sporadic cup games from time to time?
Yeah, obviously it was my time in Belgium was probably the best time I've ever had playing football. I was out there with a couple of the other youth team lads. It was sort of, you just feel so free. It was like we was invisible out there. We could do, the first time, obviously lived in digs in Manchester, it was just the three of us the first season. The second year, my girlfriend moved out with me. But you just feel so, I felt anyway, so free. Like, a lot of the time, you don't understand what people are saying to you because it's a different country. And obviously they speak in Flemish. They do speak English at times, but it was just, I was playing well on the pitch. So no one felt like they had to say to that. And it was just playing with just pure freedom, really. And you start to feel like a real adult, I suppose, at 18, 19 years old. You're living in a different country. It was priceless in terms of my football career, going to Royal Antwerp, and in like a life experience in general. It just, like you say, you grow up quickly, but it's that freedom of, now I'm an adult. Now it's up to me now. What I do is going to help me move forward in whatever I do.
Yeah, definitely. And then, so you had that spell out there, you came back, and then were you then you were then involved in the first team, so to speak, or did you come back, do reserves, and then move up to the first team? How did that kind of transpire?
So I went to Antwerp and after Christmas for one season, and we ended up winning the league and we was in the second division, getting promoted to the top league in Belgium. So after that summer, the club phoned me up and said, "Oh, we want you to go back out there to play, because it would be a high level of football." So I was absolutely buzzing because I didn't really want to go back to United and just play in the reserves. I didn't want to. This was playing in front of like 10, 15,000 every week. The fans were mad. There was fireworks going off and all that. It was just a brilliant atmosphere every week that we played. So when I went back and done really well for the first couple of months of the season in the Belgian first division, and then got the manager call me in to say, like, Sir Alex has been on the phone. They want you back in that, and I was gutted because I thought I was just going to go back and sit in the reserves at United. I'd just been at Antwerp long enough, so I was thinking, I was so crestfallen because we was doing so well at Antwerp and I was enjoying it so much. Yeah. Then went back to Manchester, and it was a time of the Worthington Cup, so went into a game away at Watford and we started that game and played really well. And from then, for the rest of that season, was just with the first team, travelled to all the games, started the occasional game, came on in a few games. So that was this season where I really had my real involvement with the first team. Yeah.
So looking back on that particular season, do you wish that Manchester United let you stay on for the full season, or do you think you kind of got an experience of both sides of things and that ultimately helped out? Which one would you prefer?
Oh, in hindsight, it was always, if I didn't have come back, I don't know if I ever would have played for Man United. Like at the time, I wanted to stay in Belgium, but when I come back and I went from playing in front of 15,000 to 70,000. So it was just, ended up being they made the right decision. It was just in my head at the time that I thought I was going back just to play in the reserves, but it ended up not working out like that.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have stayed playing in Belgium or gone back there maybe afterwards because I'd really enjoyed it, but it was the right decision to come and play, to get in the team at times at Man United, which you don't get that opportunity very often.
No, definitely not. And of course, with your time at Manchester United, you lifted the Premier League title. I mean, I've seen the picture of it. Again, just describe that moment. How did that feel? I've read an interview where you kind of talk about maybe not feeling as part, that you've done a huge amount to be worthy of it, or to to kind of say you've been involved, etc. But you made enough appearances to get the medal and to lift the trophy. But what was that experience like for that whole season, being in and amongst the first team?
Yeah, it's really intense. Obviously, every day in training, it was the standards so high. The players are so good. I was after the season finished, I was exhausted I didn't play many games, but I was just exhausted from the training and just trying to keep up with the standard of the squad and being on it every day, because it was completely different to anything I've ever experienced. Obviously, at Belgium, the standard wasn't like that at all in terms of you could have a training, someone to just say, oh, have a rest because you got it. That had never happened at Man United because you had to be on it all the time. It was an amazing experience just to see them standards. I think being in the squad that year gave me what I needed to, not obviously I didn't make it at Man United, but to be a footballer, just taking some of them standards and the lessons that I've learned probably is what got me a career a long career in football from getting that. I would say I weren't 100% comfortable at Man United. It wasn't, I loved playing football, but I didn't really like the other stuff that came with it. I never really wanted to be famous. I didn't really like, not comfortable with people knowing who I was and that sort of thing.
Right.
So it was, I wouldn't change it for the world, don't get me wrong,
No.
but I can't say I was ever completely comfortable with it.
Is that why you probably, looking back, you think that the Belgium move and the loan move that you had out there, where you talked about the freedom of it, that kind of links in together really? When you're out there, you can just play football, and you know, you possibly might not have people coming up to you and asking you questions and talking to you and stuff like that. Whereas in Manchester, I can imagine most places you went, people probably knew who you were.
Yeah, but it was the same at I loved it at United when I was a youth team player as well. At Belgium, obviously, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what to expect, really. When I went to Man United, I thought that it was an incredible opportunity, but I never thought I wanted to be a footballer, but I thought I'm going to have to do something pretty special to be a footballer at Man United. But it was the opportunity to obviously play for the biggest club in the world, and there is plenty of other teams to go through from there. Whereas if you start maybe at a lower club and you don't make it there, it's always going to be tough to stay in the game. Yeah.
And then you had a number of loan spells away from the club. I've got on here, you had I think 2 spells at Reading, one at Burnley, where you made a lot of appearances for them. What was that like, having gone from, you're lifting the trophy 1 minute, you're in and amongst the first team, and then you're then going out on loan moves? Was that something that you asked for to kind of get first team football, or was that something that the club were really saying, look, for your progress, we need you to be, we want you to be playing as much as possible?
Yeah, I think by the time I went on them loan moves to Reading and then to Burnley, I think it was always known that I probably wouldn't go back into the first team squad at United. I think it was more a case of finding somewhere else. So after the second season, I suffered a lot of injuries in around my pelvis and groins, and I was never, what had made me stand out and get games in the first team was the fact that I was really fast and could run with the ball really well. I think after the injuries and operations I had in that second season, I never really had that amazing speed that was the main part of my game, really. So it was I was never going to be a Premier League footballer at Man United after them injuries took away probably the best part of my game at the time. So when I went to Reading, I was more than happy to go to other clubs because I still wanted to be a footballer. There's like I said, there's plenty of other clubs after Man United, and the fact that you'd been at Man United means that there is quite a lot of suitors and people that are interested in giving you the opportunity.